I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is Congressman Garret Graves and my law partner, Sean Fagan. We're going to talk to you about presenting an insurance claim. We just went through this tragic flood and rain event. We're going to talk to you about providing notice to your insurance company, collecting evidence to prove your loss, and making sure you use qualified experts to give you an estimate of your loss or to rebuild. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Congressman Garret Graves and Sean Fagan.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Very pleased to have back on the show our Congressman for the 6th District, Garret Graves. This is a continuation of a show we just did, and it's about the Great Flood of 2016. Garret, let's keep diving on.
All right.
Literally, I guess. You were talking about kind of what you're going to do when you're back up there in Washington beginning after the Labor Day. There's two other things you wanted to discuss in detail.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is that, first of all, we're starting at a deficit. Most people don't understand what's going on, so we have to educate all these people about how huge these floods are.
And that means the legislators.
Absolutely.
That's what's amazing to me. I don't think, they don't know what's going on.
No, it really is amazing. It's amazing how this is out of so many people's minds while we're very intimately involved in it. But, we talked about the role that the interstate may have played, the barriers there.
Right.
I think there's some other things. The Comeet project is something else that dates back over 30 years. I mean, could you imagine if you went out and hired a contractor and said, go build me a house, and they said, yeah, you bet, we'll be done in about 35 years. I mean, what would you tell them?
I remember Senator Vitter complaining about the Army Corps and its delays and all that stuff on, I think it was a Chapel spill.
It is unbelievable how ridiculous their implementation process is. And so we've got to get that project built and just totally reform them. But the other component is, and a lot of people don't think about this, how coastal land loss in Louisiana contributed to this flood. The reality is that Lake Maurepas was largely an inland lake. And now, because of coastal land loss, it is tidally influenced. It's influenced much more
just
by
like the Pontchartrain.
It is, and it's influenced much more by the winds as well. So whenever tides are up and winds are blowing from the south, the water in Lake Maurepas is higher, where the Amite River can't drain into it as efficiently. Right. And so that is, and again, a lot of people don't think about it. When you take the Corps of Engineers and the Comeet project, you take the interstate standards, the federal interstate standards, and I-12 and how that looks like it contributed to flooding, and you take coastal land loss, which is largely a result of the federal government's actions on how they manage the river system.
That's a big deal, what you just said.
It is big, and we've got to help educate members about those issues and help them understand why it is another reason why they have an obligation to step in and help.
Because I've done a show with the Baton Rouge Port Administration folks, and I mean, the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge and New Orleans with our ports, we handle tons and tons of traffic and material for the entire United States. And because we're doing that, we're paying the consequences.
We are. The way that the river has been managed has been largely for navigation purposes and in some cases to manage floods, but it has had an adverse consequence in regard to the 1,900 square miles of land that's been lost that makes us more vulnerable.
Well, and I know that you handled that for Governor Jindal prior to becoming a congressman.
I did. I worked on coastal issues for the state for about 6 years, and we made some fundamental changes in regard to how all that was managed, and certainly began really beating on the Corps of Engineers about their role, not just in how things have been lost in coastal land loss, but importantly, how they could manage things differently moving forward to help us restore the land and make our communities more resilient.
All right, let's summarize real quick because this is a different show. We've talked about the fact that people came and helped people initially. Louisiana is amazing for that. It's just so encouraging, and praise God for it. The second thing is government programs that are available. We talked about FEMA. which is they're going to give you stuff if you qualify, and the process, the deadlines. And then we talked about the loan program via the Small Business Association. That's both to businesses and individuals. Let's now talk about the insurance component of how you get taken care of. And of course, sadly, 1 out of 8 folks had insurance, flood insurance, meaning 7 out of 8 did not. So they're going to have to utilize FEMA and the SBA and other charities and wonderful programs. But those who do have flood insurance, educate them.
Well, so if you have flood insurance, good for you, first of all. In many cases, you're eligible for up to $250,000 on the structure of the home. There is a separate contents policy where you can insure the contents of your house up to $100,000. And so if you do have flood insurance, and in fact, everyone, it's very important that you document everything, right. Pictures, videos, as much as you can, but reach out to your insurance agent, reach out to the flood insurance program. They will send an adjuster out to take a look and provide the check to you. But just urge everyone, please make sure that you immediately gut and demuck your home and demold your home. But those checks are being cut and can provide up to $250,000 for your structure and up to $100,000 for your contents.
And then they also have flood insurance for businesses, but even fewer businesses had insurance coverage. I think you quoted the number in Livingston was just, it was bleak.
It's amazing. You have up to 91% of the businesses in Livingston Parish are flooded, and from what I recall, less than half of those had flood insurance. In fact, it was significantly less than half because of the scope of this flood. So you have huge consequences in the business community as well. And look, even if the community comes back, if you don't have the businesses there to support, it's problematic. If you have the businesses but don't have the community to support, it's problematic. So this is really a symbiotic relationship. They've both got to come back, and it's important that we address these needs through the congressional process.
And the coverages, I believe, for business are $500, is that correct?
Gosh, now you put me on the spot. I don't remember.
Bottom line is that'll be in the policy. Yeah. And you can buy contents, or I think you can perhaps manipulate the contents coverage cap depending on what your needs are. Also, there's an important deadline, as I understand it, when it relates to presenting a flood claim.
There is October 13th is the date by which people need to sign up, need to register, need to file their claims. And so, look, the sooner the better. And quite frankly, it's really important that people sign up as soon as possible, because it helps us to be able to demonstrate to other members of Congress how profound this is. If people wait and take several months or several days or weeks to apply, then whenever we're up there in Washington trying to convince people the size and scale of this, it's going to make it difficult for us to do it. I'll give you one statistic that may be shocking. Some of the numbers that I saw project that this could be in the range of assistance provided to the people in Hurricane Sandy, some of the information the state gave us. So, I mean, just giving you an idea of how profound this is.
Meaning the damages.
The number of people that were affected, they were showing us some numbers that the number of people that were affected, it was well over 100,000 in this one, and over 100,000 people, I think it was 128,000 people received assistance from FEMA under Hurricane Sandy.
So we're almost already there, and we're only, what, 2 weeks out?
If the data we were given is accurate, then that's what the picture looks like.
All right, and so as the process, as I understand it, you may actually have coverage under a homeowner's policy or business policy. Say if rain came in through the roof or wind-driven rain caused some type of damage, you may be able to present a claim under that policy. And then you have a separate flood policy, and that's administered either by private insurance companies. For me, it's USAA. They told me I had coverage, sent an estimator out in the whole bit, and called me back a week later and said I didn't on my home. So I'll be butting heads with them. But from what I'm hearing is you got the third-party administrators. They'll come in, they'll estimate, appraise, they'll either deny or provide coverage, and they'll make a payment, and then they go and get reimbursed from FEMA. Or you're dealing directly with a FEMA employer representative who comes out and evaluates the damages.
Yes.
Is that your understanding?
That is, and so yeah, it's really important that you contact your insurance agent, you contact FEMA's flood insurance program as soon as possible, and have them come out and do the visit and get an adjuster to look at the cost of the damages. One
of the interesting issues that I'm considering, given the actions in my circumstances, in Louisiana we have laws that protect policyholders if an insurance company doesn't act as they should fairly. And I want to talk to you about that on the next segment. It's Locke, Meredith, Legal Lines. My special guest, Congressman Garret Graves. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm pleased to have back on the show Garret Graves. He's our congressman for the 6th District. Let's dive back in, Garret. We were talking about presenting an insurance claim. You can present a claim usually at least for structural damages. You may have contents coverage for anything that was destroyed because of the flooding. You've got to do that within 60 days, and you better notify your agent. They come out. The process is pretty similar to what we discussed earlier.
It is, yes. And very important that people do that as soon as possible to get the agents. The process is not an overnight process. It takes weeks, and in some people I've even spoken to projecting it's even going to be months before they get the check. So really urge people to very quickly get in touch with their insurance companies. Keep in mind, you can get an SBA loan to sort of bridge you through that process.
Interesting.
Now, something else that's important to note is car insurance.
Right.
Many people have lost their vehicles. If you have full coverage, car insurance may be able to cover the replacement of your vehicles, the contents of the vehicles. So there's another insurance component that's important for you to reach out and contact.
And you brought up that you actually have read or seen tons of law enforcement vehicles out of commission.
From what I understand, preliminary estimates have shown that over 200 law enforcement vehicles just from East Baton Rouge and Livingston Parish alone have been lost. And as I recall, the estimate of total vehicles exceeds 100,000 vehicles, which includes commercial and personal vehicles.
And of course, folks, and that goes back to your comment regarding the need for transportation. I mean, there's no way they're going to be able to get the cars in, number one, and number two, nobody's going to have the money to buy the new car.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And those are all costs on top of your home rebuilding, your wardrobe, and everything else that people are incurring right now.
We were talking about it earlier, really off camera, that there hadn't been a lot of media attention. I got to tell you, I feel so much frustration after those folks came down here, wouldn't leave anybody alone when Mr. Sterling was shot. Then when the police officers were murdered, they were here, and I felt like they were stirring up stuff and trying to point fingers at people and everything, and we can't get them here.
You know, after the July shootings, the media was very anxious to come here and paint our community as a bunch of haters, and it was just awful watching that happen. And then you have a situation like this where our people could not be more selfless, more hospitable, more generous.
The true nature.
And really, I mean, this is our community.
Right.
What you're seeing right now, not what we were painted to be weeks ago. And it's unfortunate that this is all happening in a media vacuum.
There was no white or black when folks were going out saving each other. But yeah, white and black folks in the boats and white and black folks being saved, including pets.
No, absolutely. In fact, we ended up just finding ourselves in different neighborhoods, and some of them we had, probably 90% white folks, and in other ones we had 90% African Americans, and look, it didn't even matter. It was just whoever we could get, whoever we could fit, folks come on, and it was, and again, it wasn't even anything anyone was thinking about at all.
And Garret, I've read accounts where you have these first responders and these law enforcement folks, their own families are going through this. Their own homes have been flooded, and they're still out there taking care and providing the service of security and rescue.
I mean, just some of the most selfless people. It was amazing. The law enforcement, the firefighters, and others we were working with, the ones that I was out with telling me that their homes were underwater at the time.
Right.
I was even out there stripping homes, gutting homes, and had people out there working with us. And I said, oh, I guess you're dry, right? Oh, no, my house is just still underwater, so I can't do anything. I'm just helping you. I mean, just incredible people, and really just some very resilient people.
And you said it earlier, the bottom line is the people were here for each other, and we had folks coming from multiple different states, from all over Louisiana also. churches, all charities of any kind came. It was just an amazing thing to watch human beings and folks helping each other.
And many of these churches flooded themselves, but still using their parking lots to serve.
So we want to say thank you to all those folks, no
absolutely.
doubt. And we want to say thank you to our law enforcement folks, and we continue prayers for the deputy who's still fighting for his life, and the families who lost their loved ones. Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit. The stuff that the state's doing. I know the state has likewise passed the state income tax and various tax deadlines for quarterly payments for business and other folks. What else has the state done?
Well, the state, the big program that they picked up is a shelter-at-home program. So they picked that one up, and they're trying to run that program. We've been working very closely with the state to try to get everyone synced up on what the right priorities are that we need to be asking the Congress, asking the White House for. A lot of those have to do with the expenses that the state would be forced to incur versus other expenses. You know, Locke, one of the things that a lot of people aren't really thinking about right now, but it is going to really compound this disaster, is the fact that a lot of our services, like our schools, our fire departments, our levee districts, our drainage boards, are funded from property taxes. Property taxes, and these homes have all just lost their values. And so you're no longer going to have the revenue stream to fund your schools, your fire departments, your police forces, and others. And those are key. Those are fundamental things to the recovery. And so, you know, this whole recovery, we've been working with the state and others on this because those are key things. If you don't have the police force to protect a community, if you don't have the schools to serve a community, really just compounding the disaster or the tragedy that's happening right now. So we're leaning forward, trying to begin addressing those issues now.
Well, and you talked about it taking years. We can look at New Orleans and see that New Orleans is still not fully recovered and will likely never recover the community of folks that were there at the time. This could be a mortal blow for some communities.
It really could, and I think that the problem is the uncertainty when people are sitting there looking at all of these expenses that they've got to figure out how to pay whenever they simply don't have the resources. That's why I think getting people more certainty and setting up a situation where we provide flood protection, they don't have to elevate their homes, getting an unmet needs program to where we can provide additional assistance on top of the FEMA and SBA dollars to help people get back in their homes, to help people get back in their businesses. That is going to be critical, and we've got to do it as soon as we can, just to give people certainty and predictability for what their future looks like.
Garret, what can we as the population that you're serving do to help you do your job? I know you've talked about the government officials giving you information about their needs. What do folks need to do other than filing their claims and such?
I'd say three things. One is making sure that people are signing up, disasterassistance.gov, sba.gov/disaster, and signing up there. Number two, I think it's really important, and look, I want to be very clear. Thank you for all of the generosity and hospitality, but we're going to have to keep helping out our neighbors. We are, and that's going to be really important. And the third thing is using social media and other contacts and networks to alert people, to educate people around the United States on how profound this disaster is, how pervasive it is all around our community, affecting every demographic, businesses, homeowners, renters, all around our community, because these different groups and associations and memberships that you're involved in, your social media sites and friends and relatives in other states, it's really important that we raise national awareness for this so we can get the assistance we need from other members of Congress.
It's funny, most folks wouldn't think about that actually helping them by presenting their claims and making sure everybody is educated on this.
It's a very powerful tool.
So I know also, and you brought it up earlier, that this issue of having to rebuild, that's going to become a huge issue here within the next month, if not now. And that is folks trying to decide whether or not they tear down their building or they're going to rebuild it. If they are going to rebuild it, where? Does it have to be in non-flood zone? Can you still get insurance if it flooded? And where are you going to get the supplies and the labor to do all this? I know the governments have waived their permit fees in some instances. They're still requiring permits, so you got the delays with finding a contractor and inspectors. How do you do this?
Well, look, from a financial perspective, most people are going to be facing really a false choice. They're not even going to have the financial resources to be able to begin rebuilding their homes when you start looking at all the costs that are incurred. And that's why I think it's so critical that we get these unmet needs or these assistance programs enacted as quickly as possible. Obviously, people are going to have to work within their means until we're able to provide more certainty on what those programs look like. But I think that is going to be be one of our top issues that we're working on in Congress for the month of September.
Garret, thank you so
Hey,
very
thank
much.
you.
It's been wonderful
Thank
to have
Same
you on
here.
the show and educating us.
Appreciate
I
it.
look forward to seeing you in October for an update.
All right.
This is Locke, Meredith Legal Lines, my very special guest, our Congressman, 6th District, Garret Graves. Thank you for being with us.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I've just finished 2 segments with our Congressman, Garret Graves, regarding the flood damage and the huge tragic event that it's been in our communities. I've got my law partner, Sean Fagan, on. Sean, thank you for joining me. We talked to you with Garret Graves, the Congressman, about how you access federal government programs to hopefully help you deal with the tragedy and your needs. But in the event you have insurance coverage, and we also discussed that to some degree with Congressman Graves, I'm going to talk with my partner, Sean Fagan, about how you go about presenting a claim, accumulating the evidence, and making sure you're giving the insurance company everything they need to properly adjust the claim and pay you timely. Sean, let's talk about it in the context of this event. We had rain, we had wind-driven rain, and we also had flood waters this time. So we can have 2 different kinds of insurance policies applicable. If it's a homeowner, he might have a homeowner's insurance policy and a flood policy. If it's a business owner, he may have a business policy and he has a business flood policy.
That's right.
All right. So in those circumstances, let's first adjust with, we're dealing with a scenario where we got wind-driven rain or just rain, and we have leakage down a wall or some type of problem relating to the rain or the wind-driven rain. We'll go into which policy?
It's going to be in the homeowner's policy, the business policy.
Right.
The of course, the question is the water coming from above or is the water coming from below?
The bottom line.
If the water's coming from above, it's going to hit your homeowner's or your business policy, as well as contents. For flood policies, you've got 2 options. You can get a building-only coverage, or you can have building plus contents.
Correct.
And that policy is governed by the federal, is issued by the federal government. It usually comes through your homeowner's policy folks, but they don't actually issue the policy. They just administer it.
Right. They're called typically a third-party administrator on behalf of FEMA or the federal government. Mm-hmm. And in the case where you're dealing with your own homeowners or your business policy, you brought up the fact that the rain could cause damage to the contents that way, or the damage could be caused to the contents if you also had flood that way, and that's a fight the insurance companies may instigate amongst themselves, but you shouldn't be the one that has to pay the price for their delays. So let's talk about how you present a claim under either of the policies. You're going to have to provide notice to the insurance companies, and under the flood policy, you got 60 days within which to provide notice, and under the homeowners and business policies, it can be pretty much controlled by the contract.
Correct.
And let's make the distinction. I mean, you can adjust the amounts of coverages that you have through the private insurance company, whether it's USAA or State Farm or Allstate or one of those guys. You can have a higher level of contents or lower or vice versa on the structure, whereas the coverages are strictly limited in the federal flood policy.
That's right. No, you just have a much more limited menu of options.
All right, so let's say I've got damage both to my structure and to the contents, and I have, for this circumstance or this example, both types of policy. What's the first thing I should do?
Well, the first thing is going to be obviously you notify the company. You say, I've got this loss. You immediately start to document. I mean, you videotape. You don't throw anything away unless you videotaped it. taking photographs. In this day of digital cameras, you can't have too many pictures.
And
Just
phones
take them
in the digital
Yeah.
camera,
I mean,
there's no excuse.
Wear it out, give it out. Have 100 pictures instead of 10. Then when the adjuster comes in, you better show the adjuster what you've done. If time is of the essence, you're also going to have an obligation to minimize your damages.
Right.
So
Called mitigation.
That's right. And so if the adjuster can't get out there for a week, you get out there. You may have to start tearing out carpets, tearing out rugs, tearing out walls. But you videotape it. You take pictures before you do it.
And it's interesting that in the analysis of what the damages are, the folks are also going to want to know, to the extent that it can be determined, what you paid for the item, or what's going to be the cost to make a repair of the structure. They're also going to want to know the age of the item, because there's this concept of depreciation in the analysis, and there's different types of contract language whether it's going to be a replacement cost versus the value, fair market value of the item. Explain to folks a little better.
That's the hardest thing that people don't usually find out until it's too late. So the one thing we can say is check your policies now before you have an event that requires you to find out the hard way. Replacement is exactly what it sounds like. You have a sofa, it seats 3 people, it's made of leather, it's from a certain manufacturer, a certain quality. They have to replace it with like kind.
Regardless of age.
Regardless of age. There's no depreciation. If you have an actual value policy, they take that same sofa, say you've been sitting on it for 5 years, and that sofa that you bought for $5,000 or $500 may be worth 1/10 of what it was because you've been sitting on it for 5 years.
That's right. Let's talk about the circumstance where you're getting the cost to repair, say, a downstairs of a home or something, or your entire home. How do you go about doing that?
Well, that's going to be bringing in estimators. Now, what you're going to have is the adjuster coming in, the field adjuster, who's going to come in, look around your house. He's going to give you his opinion or her opinion of what it's going to take to repair everything. Obviously, you have to be concerned whether or not they're giving a fair appraisal. Only way to do that is to bring somebody else in who's knowledgeable and ask them, maybe a contractor, if it's going to be physical repairs, and ask them to give you an estimate also.
That's right. And the bottom line is, we're lawyers. We deal with the scenarios where it doesn't work out between the parties and you ended up going to a court. And so it's very important that the folks you use to give you guidance on what the cost is going to be to repair your home and put it back to the way that it was before the damage is qualified. I mean, you don't want to get some guy that just hung up a sign in his backyard next to the interstate saying, I fixed stuff. You need somebody who's qualified, has a good history of this stuff, and has hopefully testified in court before, and thoroughly documents the expense of every component of rebuilding your home.
Yeah, which you don't want an Uncle Earl who's built a bunch of homes coming in to give an estimate, because in court Uncle Earl may not have the qualifications. You want someone who's licensed by the state and has the qualifications to walk in and say, I've done this and I've passed the necessary tests to be certified to do this in the state of Louisiana.
And the reason is because sooner or later a judge or jury is going to be required to decide who they believe, the estimator who came out, or the expert that the insurance company ultimately hired and reviewed all the photographs and other evidence that was collected, or your guy that you've hired that you say you're going to pay to rebuild the house once the insurance company pays you.
That's right. You don't want to go to a gunfight with a knife.
Let's talk about the fact too that also that in Louisiana we have certain laws that require insurance companies perform certain tasks within a deadline period, and if they do not, they're punished by law and they have to pay penalties or attorney's fees.
That's right. Under Louisiana law, once you've provided notice of the claim and you've given the insurance company not only the notice but really the value, you have the opportunity to replace what they have to replace. If they don't do it within a certain period of time, they can be held liable for penalties, even attorney's fees and costs.
And even if they pay you some amount of money, it doesn't require that you accept that and you forego any future litigation. You can still go after them. So that's our advice to folks. Make sure you hire qualified experts. This is Locke, Meredith, Sean Fagan, Legal Lines. Thank you for being with us.